Welcome back, car enthusiasts. The 1940s were a challenging time for automakers, with World War II dominating the first half of the decade. But that didn't stop some car companies from making some pretty questionable decisions. Today, we're diving into 7 of the dumbest and worst cars from America in the 1940s. These cars might not have been the best, but they sure are interesting. Let's get started. The 1941 Graham Hollywood is a poignant example of a car that, despite its ambitious name and unique design, couldn't escape the harsh realities of the automotive industry during the challenging years of the early 1940s. Graham Page, the company behind the Hollywood, was once a respected player in the American automobile market, known for producing innovative and stylish vehicles. However, by the time the Hollywood was introduced, the company was already on a downward trajectory, struggling to compete in a rapidly changing industry. The Graham Hollywood was an attempt to recapture some of the glory that the company had enjoyed in the 1920s and 1930s. Its design was undeniably distinctive, featuring an aerodynamic front end with a low, sloping nose and a fastback rear that was intended to evoke the streamlined elegance of contemporary luxury cars. The Hollywood styling was actually a continuation of the design language from the Cord 810-812. A revolutionary car from the late 1930s that had set new standards for automotive aesthetics with its hidden headlights and smooth, flowing lines. When Cord went out of business, Graham acquired the dies and tooling for the body, which they then adapted for the Hollywood. However, by the time the Graham Hollywood was introduced, the design had already begun to show its age. What might have seemed cutting edge in the mid-1930s looked somewhat outdated in the context of the early 1940s. Especially as the industry was beginning to move towards more conservative and utilitarian designs in response to the economic uncertainties brought on by World War II. The Hollywood's striking appearance, while still handsome in its own right, didn't align with the evolving tastes of American car buyers, who were increasingly looking for practicality and reliability over bold styling. Beyond its looks, the Graham Hollywood faced several other challenges that ultimately contributed to its failure. The car was powered by a supercharged 6-cylinder engine, which, while impressive on paper, didn't deliver the kind of performance that might have justified its price tag. Additionally, the Hollywood was plagued by quality control issues, a problem that was exacerbated by the financial difficulties Graham Page was facing at the time. The company simply didn't have the resources to fully develop and refine the car before it went into production, leading to a product that, while visually striking, was not competitive in terms of reliability or value. The Hollywood's fate was further sealed by the broader economic conditions of the time. As the United States entered World War II, the automobile industry was redirected towards the war effort, and civilian car production was halted. For a struggling company like Graham Page, this was a devastating blow. The Hollywood, which had already failed to capture the public's imagination, was one of the last models the company would produce before it exited the automobile business altogether. After the war, Graham Page shifted its focus to other ventures, including real estate and farm equipment, but it never returned to car manufacturing. In retrospect, the Graham Hollywood is a fascinating chapter in automotive history, representing both the end of an era for Graham Page and the last gasp of the pre-war American automobile industry. It's a car that had all the elements of a classic, a distinctive design, an ambitious name, and a storied company behind it. But it arrived at the wrong time, in the wrong market. Today, the Hollywood is a rare and collectible car, valued by enthusiasts for its unique place in history and its connection to the iconic Cord 810-812. However, its story is also a reminder of how quickly fortunes can change in the automotive industry, and how even the most glamorous designs can struggle to find a place in a market that demands both innovation and practicality. The Hollywood's legacy is bittersweet, reflecting the challenges faced by independent automakers during a period of great upheaval in the industry. While it wasn't enough to save Graham Page, the Hollywood remains a testament to the company's commitment to design and innovation, even in the face of overwhelming odds. It's a car that, despite its shortcomings, still captures the imagination, embodying a sense of style and ambition that, while not fully realized, is still worth remembering. The 1947 Kaiser Special was intended to be a symbol of post-war optimism and innovation, representing the hopes of the newly formed Kaiser Fraser Corporation. Henry J. Kaiser, a prominent industrialist known for his contributions to shipbuilding during World War II, had ambitious plans to break into the automobile industry and challenge the dominance of the Big Three: Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler. Partnering with automotive executive Joseph W. Fraser, Kaiser set out to create a car that would capture the imagination of a nation eager for new beginnings after the war. However, despite the grand intentions behind it, the Kaiser Special ended up as a missed opportunity, falling short of the expectations placed upon it. The 1947 Kaiser Special was among the first new cars introduced to the American market after World War II, a time when demand for automobiles was incredibly high. Many automakers had been focused on producing military vehicles during the war, and the public was hungry for fresh, innovative designs as the economy shifted back to peacetime production. The Kaiser Special was one of the earliest attempts to meet this demand, but instead of revolutionizing the market, it became a symbol of what could have been. One of the major drawbacks of the Kaiser Special was its design. While the car was modern by pre-war standards, it didn't break any new ground in the rapidly evolving post-war automotive landscape. Its boxy, somewhat utilitarian appearance was functional, but lacked the flair and excitement that many buyers were looking for at the time. The styling was conservative, with none of the sweeping lines or dramatic curves that characterized some of the more successful cars of the late 1940s and early 1950s. In a decade that saw the rise of tail fins, chrome, and other bold design elements, the Kaiser Special looked decidedly plain. Under the hood, the Kaiser Special was equipped with a reliable but unremarkable engine. It featured a 6-cylinder power plant that was adequate for everyday driving, but didn't offer the performance or excitement that might have set it apart from its competitors. The car's ride and handling were also competent, but far from exceptional, making it a safe, if uninspiring, choice for consumers. In a market where new cars were eagerly anticipated, the Kaiser Special's lack of innovation made it difficult to stand out. Kaiser Fraser's approach to marketing the Special also contributed to its underwhelming reception. While the company emphasized the car's practicality and reliability, qualities that were certainly important, this message didn't resonate as strongly with a public that was ready to embrace the optimism and excitement of the post-war era. After years of wartime austerity, Americans were looking for more than just functional transportation. They wanted style, speed, and a sense of adventure. Unfortunately, the Kaiser Special didn't deliver on these fronts. Another factor that worked against the Kaiser Special was the intense competition in the post-war automotive market. The Big Three were quick to retool their factories and roll out new models that captured the public's imagination. Ford, GM, and Chrysler had the resources and experience to quickly adapt to the changing market, and their new cars were often more stylish, powerful, and feature-rich than what smaller automakers like Kaiser Fraser could offer. The Special, with its conservative design and modest performance, struggled to compete against these more established brands. Despite its shortcomings, the Kaiser Special wasn't a complete failure. It was a solidly built car that served its owners well, offering reliability and durability at a time when these qualities were still highly valued. However, in a market that was rapidly evolving and becoming more competitive, being merely good enough wasn't sufficient to ensure long-term success. The Special's failure to capture the public's imagination ultimately reflected the broader challenges that Kaiser Fraser faced as a new player in a tough industry. The story of the 1947 Kaiser Special is a reminder of how difficult it is to succeed in the automotive world, even with the backing of a visionary leader like Henry J. Kaiser. The car's lackluster performance in the market highlights the importance of not just meeting, but exceeding consumer expectations, especially during times of great change and innovation. While the Kaiser Special may not have been the game-changer that its creators hoped it would be, it still holds a place in history as one of the early post-war attempts to redefine American motoring. In the end, the Kaiser Special was overshadowed by more dynamic and exciting cars from other manufacturers, becoming a footnote in the broader story of post-war automotive development. The 1940 Willies Americar occupies an interesting niche in automotive history, representing a time when practicality and affordability were paramount concerns in the lead-up to the United States' entry into World War II. The Americar was a no-nonsense vehicle designed to meet the needs of a nation still recovering from the Great Depression and on the brink of war. While it was far from glamorous, the Americar played a crucial role in keeping the Willies Overland Company afloat during a challenging period. However, despite its importance in the company's survival, the Americar was far from a memorable or exciting car. The Willies Americar was introduced at a time when the automotive industry was beginning to shift its focus from luxury and style to practicality and cost-effectiveness. The looming war and economic pressures meant that many American families were looking for affordable, reliable transportation, rather than the sleek and powerful vehicles that had characterized the previous decade. The Americar was Willies Overland's answer to this demand. A compact, budget-friendly car that could get the job done without breaking the bank. In terms of design, the Americar was modest, to say the least. It had a simple, boxy shape, with few of the embellishments that were common in other cars of the era. The focus was clearly on function over form, with a minimalist aesthetic that was dictated more by necessity than by any desire to stand out on the road. This lack of flair made the Americar somewhat forgettable in terms of its appearance. While it was a solid, workmanlike vehicle, it didn't have the kind of visual appeal that would have made it a standout in the market. Under the hood, the Americar was powered by a small 134 cubic inch inline-4 engine that produced a modest 63 horsepower. This was sufficient for basic transportation needs, but it was far from thrilling. The engine's limited power meant that the Americar struggled to keep up with traffic, especially on highways or in more demanding driving conditions. The car's performance was adequate for its intended purpose, getting from point A to point B, but it didn't offer much in the way of driving enjoyment. The Americar's interior was equally Spartan. In keeping with its budget-friendly focus, the car's cabin was stripped down to the essentials, with few amenities or comforts. The seats were basic, the dashboard was simple, and there were no frills to speak of. This was a car designed for utility, not for luxury, and it showed in every aspect of its design. For many drivers, the Americar was a means of transportation, nothing more. A vehicle that served its purpose without making any attempt to offer an enjoyable or memorable driving experience. Despite its lack of excitement, the Willies Americar was a critical product for Willies Overland. The company had been struggling financially, and the Americar's affordability and practicality helped to keep it afloat during a difficult time. The car's success in the market allowed Willies Overland to survive long enough to become a key player in the production of military vehicles during World War II, most notably the Jeep, which would go on to become one of the most iconic vehicles in automotive history. However, once the war was over and the American economy began to recover, the qualities that had made the Americar a success, its affordability and simplicity, became less appealing to consumers. The post-war era saw a resurgence in demand for more stylish, powerful, and comfortable vehicles, and the Americar quickly became outdated. By the end of the war, the Americar had largely faded from memory, overshadowed by the more glamorous and exciting cars that followed. Today, the Willies Americar is remembered more for its role in keeping Willies Overland in business than for any particular merits as a car. It was a vehicle born out of necessity, a product of its time that fulfilled a specific need, but failed to leave a lasting impression. While it may not have been a car that people wanted to drive for pleasure, it was a car that helped ensure the survival of a company that would go on to make a much more significant impact on the automotive world with the Jeep. In conclusion, the 1940 Willies Americar was a car that prioritized practicality over excitement. It was small, basic, and affordable, but it lacked the performance, style, and features that might have made it a more memorable vehicle. The Americar was more of a wartime necessity than a car that people actually wanted to own. And as soon as the economic and social climate changed, it quickly faded into obscurity. While it may not be remembered as one of the great cars of its era, the Americar's contribution to Willies Overland's survival and its place in history as a symbol of a challenging time cannot be overlooked. The 1948 Fraser Manhattan is an intriguing example of post-war automotive ambition that fell short of its lofty goals. Introduced by the Kaiser Fraser Corporation, the Manhattan was intended to be a luxury vehicle that could compete with the established high-end brands of the time. However, despite its promising intentions, the Manhattan struggled to deliver the elegance, performance, and innovation that were expected from a car in its class. As a result, it quickly became overshadowed by more successful models and is now largely remembered as a missed opportunity in automotive history. At first glance, the Fraser Manhattan had the makings of a luxury car. It was designed to be a flagship model for the Fraser brand, offering features and styling cues that were meant to appeal to affluent buyers in the post-war market. The car was positioned as an upscale alternative to the more modest offerings from other manufacturers, with the aim of capturing a segment of the market that was eager to embrace the newfound prosperity of the late 1940s. Unfortunately, while the Manhattan had the ambition to be a top-tier vehicle, it ultimately fell short in several key areas. One of the most noticeable issues with the Fraser Manhattan was its design. The car was large and heavy, with a body that lacked the graceful lines and proportions typically associated with luxury vehicles. Instead of exuding elegance, the Manhattan came across as awkward and bulky. Its wide, boxy shape gave it a somewhat ungainly appearance, and despite the best efforts of its designers, it failed to capture the sleek, sophisticated look that was becoming increasingly popular among luxury car buyers. The car's design, while not outright offensive, simply didn't have the visual appeal needed to stand out in a competitive market. The Manhattan's performance was another area where it failed to live up to expectations. Under the hood, the car was equipped with a 6-cylinder engine that, while adequate for basic transportation, didn't deliver the kind of power or smoothness that luxury buyers were looking for. The car's weight further hampered its performance, making it feel sluggish and underpowered on the road. In an era when performance was becoming an increasingly important factor in automotive design, the Manhattan's lackluster engine and heavy frame made it difficult to justify its premium price tag. Inside, the Fraser Manhattan aimed to offer a luxurious experience, but the execution was somewhat lacking. The interior was spacious, but it didn't have the refinement or attention to detail that one would expect from a high-end vehicle. The materials used were decent, but not exceptional, and the overall design of the cabin was more functional than opulent. While the Manhattan was certainly comfortable, it didn't have the kind of lavish, meticulously crafted interior that could have set it apart from its competitors. For buyers who were looking for a truly luxurious driving experience, the Manhattan's interior was likely a disappointment. In terms of features, the Manhattan did have a few innovative touches, but they weren't enough to overcome the car's other shortcomings. The car offered amenities like a push-button radio and a clock, which were relatively advanced for the time. But these features weren't unique to the Manhattan and didn't do much to enhance its overall appeal. The car's technological offerings were solid but unremarkable, and they failed to create the kind of buzz that could have helped the Manhattan gain traction in the market. The Fraser Manhattan's biggest problem, however, was its identity. The car was marketed as a luxury vehicle, but it didn't have the performance, styling, or prestige to back up that claim. It was positioned as a high-end option, but in reality, it was more of a mid-range vehicle dressed up with a few luxury trappings. This confusion over the car's true nature made it difficult for buyers to see the value in choosing a Manhattan over more established luxury brands, and as a result, sales were disappointing. In the grand scheme of things, the Fraser Manhattan ended up being a footnote in automotive history. It was a car that had potential, but ultimately failed to deliver on its promises. The Manhattan's lackluster design, mediocre performance, and confused positioning prevented it from making a lasting impact in the market, and it quickly faded into obscurity as other, more successful models took center stage. Today, the Fraser Manhattan is remembered more as a cautionary tale about the challenges of breaking into the luxury car market than as a significant milestone in automotive design. In conclusion, the 1948 Fraser Manhattan is a reminder that ambition alone is not enough to create a successful luxury vehicle. The 1946 Studebaker Champion is a curious entry in the history of American automobiles, embodying both the post-war optimism of the era and the challenges faced by automakers as they transitioned from wartime production back to civilian manufacturing. Known for its distinctive design and reputation for affordability, the Champion was intended to be a practical, reliable car for the average American family. However, despite its noble intentions, the car struggled with a design that was more awkward than appealing and a performance that left much to be desired. One of the most striking aspects of the 1946 Studebaker Champion was its unusual design, particularly the front end. The car featured an upright, narrow grille that gave it a distinctive but somewhat peculiar appearance. The grille, flanked by round headlights, looked more like it belonged on an earlier, pre-war vehicle, rather than a car that was supposed to signal a new beginning in the post-war era. This design choice, while unique, didn't resonate with everyone, and many found the Champion's front end to be awkward and out of place. The car's overall shape was somewhat bulky and lacked the streamlined look that was becoming increasingly popular in the late 1940s. Despite its unconventional appearance, the Studebaker Champion was designed to be an affordable and practical option for post-war consumers. With many families looking to purchase a new car after years of rationing and limited production, the Champion aimed to provide reliable transportation at a reasonable price. It was marketed as a car that could meet the needs of everyday drivers, offering decent fuel economy and a comfortable interior. However, while it was certainly accessible, the Champion struggled to stand out in a market that was becoming increasingly competitive. Under the hood, the 1946 Studebaker Champion was powered by a modest engine that, while adequate for basic transportation, didn't deliver the kind of performance that would excite drivers. The car's engine was underpowered, especially when compared to some of its contemporaries, and it struggled to provide the acceleration and top speeds that many consumers were beginning to expect. This lack of power was particularly noticeable when the car was loaded with passengers or cargo, making it feel sluggish and underwhelming on the road. For those who were looking for a more spirited driving experience, the Champion was likely a disappointment. Inside, the Champion was designed with practicality in mind. The interior was spacious enough to accommodate a small family, and the seats were reasonably comfortable for the time. However, much like the exterior, the interior design was more functional than stylish. The materials used were basic, and there wasn't much in the way of luxury or refinement. The dashboard and controls were straightforward, but they lacked the innovative touches that might have made the car feel more special. While the Champion was certainly usable, it didn't offer much in the way of excitement or flair. One of the key selling points of the Studebaker Champion was its affordability. In the post-war era, many consumers were looking for a dependable car that wouldn't break the bank, and the Champion fit the bill. It was priced competitively, making it an attractive option for budget-conscious buyers. However, this focus on affordability came at the cost of cutting corners in other areas. The car's performance and design were compromised to keep costs down, and while it was certainly a practical choice, it didn't inspire much enthusiasm among drivers. The Champion's lackluster performance and odd design ultimately limited its appeal. While it was a functional car that provided basic transportation, it didn't have the style, power, or innovation that could have made it a standout in the market. As a result, the Champion ended up being more of a utilitarian vehicle than a car that people were excited to own. It filled a niche for those who needed an affordable car, but it didn't offer much beyond that. In retrospect, the 1946 Studebaker Champion is remembered more for its quirks than for its successes. It was a car that reflected the challenges of the time, an era when automakers were scrambling to meet the demands of a rapidly changing market. While Studebaker was known for pushing boundaries and taking risks, the Champion missed the mark in key areas, resulting in a vehicle that was more memorable for its oddities than for its achievements. In conclusion, the 1946 Studebaker Champion serves as a reminder that innovation and affordability don't always go hand in hand. While the car was designed to be a practical, budget-friendly option for post-war consumers, its awkward design and underwhelming performance prevented it from achieving lasting success. The 1947 Crosley CC, coming in at number 6 on our list, is a car that often sparks curiosity for its distinctive appearance and compact size. While it might be considered cute or even charming by some, the Crosley CC struggled to establish itself as a practical and serious contender in the post-war automotive market. This tiny car, with its equally tiny engine, was more of a novelty than a vehicle designed for the demands of everyday driving. The Crosley CC was introduced at a time when the American automotive industry was rapidly expanding, and consumers were eagerly looking for reliable transportation options after years of wartime restrictions. Powell Crosley Jr., the entrepreneur behind the brand, envisioned the CC as an affordable and efficient car that would appeal to budget-conscious buyers. In theory, the concept was sound. A small, economical car that was easy to drive and park, ideal for short trips around town. However, in practice, the CC's limitations quickly became apparent. One of the most noticeable features of the Crosley CC was its diminutive size. With a wheelbase of just 80 inches and a curb weight of around 1,000 pounds, the CC was one of the smallest cars on the road. While this made it easy to maneuver and park in tight spaces, it also meant that the car offered very little in terms of interior space or comfort. The cabin was cramped, with barely enough room for 2 passengers and limited cargo capacity. For most families, the CC simply didn't offer the space they needed, making it a tough sell in a market where larger, more versatile vehicles were in high demand. Under the hood, the Crosley CC was powered by a tiny 724cc, 4-cylinder engine that produced a modest 26.5 horsepower. While this engine was efficient and contributed to the car's reputation for good fuel economy, it also meant that the CC was severely underpowered. The car struggled to keep up with traffic, particularly on highways or steep inclines, where its lack of power became painfully obvious. The CC's top speed was around 50 miles per hour, which might have been sufficient for short city commutes, but it was far from adequate for longer trips or more challenging driving conditions. In terms of design, the Crosley CC was undeniably unique. Its compact, boxy shape and minimalist styling gave it a distinctive look that set it apart from the larger, more rounded cars of the era. However, this design also contributed to the car's status as more of a novelty than a practical vehicle. The CC's small size and unconventional appearance made it stand out on the road, but not always in a positive way. Many buyers were put off by its toy-like proportions and the perception that it wasn't a real car capable of handling everyday driving needs. Despite these drawbacks, the Crosley CC did have a few redeeming qualities. It was incredibly affordable, with a price tag that was significantly lower than most other cars on the market at the time. This made it accessible to a wide range of buyers, particularly those who were looking for a second car or a vehicle for short local trips. The CC was also known for its fuel efficiency, which was a major selling point in an era when gasoline was still a precious commodity. For urban dwellers who didn't need to travel long distances, the CC offered an economical and convenient solution. However, the Crosley CC's appeal was limited by its narrow scope of use. While it might have been adequate for running errands around town or commuting short distances, it was clearly out of its depth on the open road. The car's lack of power, limited interior space, and minimalistic design made it impractical for anything beyond the most basic transportation needs. As a result, the CC was often seen as more of a novelty item, a car that was fun to look at and perhaps amusing to drive, but not one that could be relied upon for serious, everyday use. The Crosley CC's place in automotive history is reflective of the challenges faced by small car manufacturers in the post-war era. While there was a market for affordable, efficient vehicles, consumers still expected a certain level of performance and practicality. The CC, with its tiny engine and compact size, struggled to meet these expectations, ultimately limiting its success. It's remembered today more for its quirks and charm than for its contributions to automotive innovation. In conclusion, the 1947 Crosley CC is a car that occupies an interesting niche in the history of American automobiles. It was a vehicle that promised affordability and efficiency at a time when these qualities were highly valued, but it ultimately fell short in delivering the practicality and performance that most buyers required. While it might have been a cute and quirky addition to the roads, the Crosley CC was more of a novelty than a serious contender in the market, and it serves as a reminder that sometimes being different isn't enough to ensure success. Rounding out our list is the 1949 Nash 600, a car that, despite its innovations, is often remembered more for its unfortunate design than its contributions to automotive history. The Nash 600, with its distinctive bathtub styling, is frequently cited as a prime example of how daring design choices can sometimes miss the mark, leading to mixed reactions from the public and critics alike. At the time of its release, the Nash 600 was considered groundbreaking in certain aspects, particularly in its construction. It was one of the first American cars to utilize unibody construction, a method that integrated the body and chassis into a single unit. This innovation made the car lighter, more rigid, and more fuel efficient, a significant advantage in an era when most cars were built with a separate body and frame. The Nash 600 was also ahead of its time in terms of aerodynamics. Its streamlined shape was designed to reduce drag and improve fuel efficiency, which was an important consideration for post-war consumers looking to get the most out of every gallon of gasoline. However, while the Nash 600's engineering might have been forward-thinking, its aesthetics were anything but universally appreciated. The car's rounded, almost bulbous shape earned it the unflattering nickname of the bathtub Nash. The design featured a high, arched roofline, wide fenders that blended seamlessly into the body, and a front grille that was more functional than fashionable. While the intention was to create a sleek, modern vehicle, the result was a car that many found awkward and unattractive. The Nash 600's styling was a stark departure from the more angular, chrome-laden designs that were popular at the time. While Nash was attempting to embrace a futuristic aesthetic, the execution left much to be desired. The car's proportions were often criticized as being strange and ungainly, with a body that seemed too tall and narrow relative to its length. This gave the car a somewhat top-heavy appearance, which was not helped by its rounded roofline and smooth, featureless sides. For many, the Nash 600 simply didn't look like the kind of car they wanted to drive. In addition to its polarizing design, the Nash 600 also struggled with performance issues that further hindered its appeal. Under the hood, the car was powered by a modest inline-six engine that, while efficient, was not particularly powerful. With a horsepower rating that lagged behind some of its competitors, the Nash 600 was often criticized for its lackluster acceleration and underwhelming performance on the road. This was a significant drawback at a time when American drivers were beginning to demand more power and speed from their vehicles. Despite these challenges, the Nash 600 was not without its merits. The car's unibody construction did contribute to a smoother, more stable ride, and its aerodynamic design did, in fact, improve fuel efficiency compared to more traditionally styled vehicles. However, these advantages were often overshadowed by the car's aesthetic shortcomings and its lack of power, making it a tough sell in a market where style and performance were increasingly important to buyers. The Nash 600's place in automotive history is a testament to the risks and rewards of innovation. On one hand, it was a car that introduced several important advancements, such as unibody construction and aerodynamic design, that would eventually become industry standards. On the other hand, its unconventional styling and underpowered engine meant that it failed to capture the hearts and minds of the driving public. The Nash 600 is a reminder that while pushing the boundaries of design and engineering is essential for progress, it's equally important to ensure that those innovations resonate with consumers. In the end, the Nash 600's legacy is one of both innovation and caution. It was a car that dared to be different, but in doing so, it became a polarizing figure in the automotive world. While some appreciated its forward-thinking design and engineering, others saw it as a misstep that highlighted the importance of balancing form and function. Today, the Nash 600 is often remembered as a symbol of how even the most well-intentioned designs can fall flat when they fail to connect with the public. And there you have it, 7 of the dumbest and worst cars from America in the 1940s. These cars might have had good intentions, but they missed the mark in some big ways. Which one do you think was the worst of the bunch? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.